the Poverty Point trade network. The ancient marketplace at the edge of the world. Imagine standing on a ridge above a great river. The year is roughly 1700 BC. In Egypt, pharaohs are building temples. In China, the Shang dynasty is just taking shape. In Britain, the final stones of Stonehenge are being hauled into place. And here, deep in the swampy lowlands of what we now call northeastern Louisiana, something extraordinary is happening. Something that most of the modern world has never heard of, and yet arguably rivals any of those famous achievements in sheer ambition and complexity. This is Poverty Point, and it is about to become the commercial heartbeat of an entire continent. The name Poverty Point does it no favors. It comes from a 19th century cotton plantation that was built over the site. A sad irony for a place that was once, by all accounts, fabulously rich in human activity, ingenuity, and connection. The site was built and occupied from around 1700 BC to 1100 BC, which means it thrived for roughly 6 centuries, longer than the entire span of the Roman Empire. The Poverty Point culture was the archaeological culture of prehistoric indigenous peoples who inhabited a portion of North America's lower Mississippi Valley and surrounding Gulf Coast from about 1730 to 1350 BC. Archaeologists have identified more than 100 sites belonging to this mound builder culture, who also formed a large trading network throughout much of the eastern part of what is now the United States. But the central site, the beating heart of this world, was located on the Macon Ridge in Louisiana, near the town of Ypres, and it was unlike anything else on the continent. Let's talk about what these people actually built, because it sets the stage for everything else. The earthworks dominating the central site were constructed in the shape of 6 concentric half-hexagons, or C-shaped earthen embankments, 4 to 6 feet high. From the air, or on a map, these ridges look like a giant series of parentheses nested inside one another, all opening toward the west, toward the river. Mound A. The largest Poverty Point mound rose 72 feet tall, 710 feet long, and 660 feet wide. That is not a hill. That is a pyramid. Built without metal tools, without the wheel, and without any form of writing. It has been estimated that landscape preparation and earthworks construction may have required moving as many as 53 million cubic feet of soil. Considering that a cubic foot of soil weighs 75 to 100 pounds, and that the laborers carried this dirt in roughly 50-pound basket loads, it is obvious that this was a great communal engineering feat. Think about that for a moment. Tens of millions of cubic feet of earth moved one basketful at a time by people who had no draft animals, no carts, no cranes. Just bodies, determination, and an astonishing degree of social coordination. This site is often considered to be the New York City of its day, because it appears to have been so much more elaborate and sophisticated than anything else that was happening in North America at that time. Now, here is the twist that makes Poverty Point truly remarkable. The detail that stops archaeologists in their tracks even today. The people of Poverty Point did not grow crops or raise animals for food. No other hunting and gathering society made mounds at this scale anywhere else in the ancient world. These were hunter-gatherers, people who ate what the river gave them: fish, deer, wild plants, birds. They had no farms, no granaries, no domesticated livestock, and yet they built monuments that rival the pyramids in organizational complexity, and they ran a trade network that stretched across an entire continent. Every assumption we carry about what primitive hunter-gatherers could accomplish, Poverty Point dismantles it completely. So what was driving all of this? What was the engine? Trade. Pure, ambitious, far-reaching trade. The diverse habitats of the Mississippi River floodplain and Macon Ridge provided a variety of foods and other necessary resources. The only material that was not readily available here was stone, a critical resource for people who relied on stone tools. They developed a vast trading network to fulfill that need. Stone, in a landscape of mud and water, was everything. You needed it to cut, scrape, drill, hunt, and build. Without stone, you were helpless. And the lower Mississippi Valley had almost none. So the people of Poverty Point went out and got it, from places hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 miles away. Occupants of the central site traveled by canoe on the waterways of the Mississippi River system to establish a trading network with other cultures in the Appalachians, the Great Lakes, and in the Ohio, Tennessee, and lower Mississippi River valleys. Poverty Point's major trade imports were rocks and minerals, including hematite, magnetite, quartz, sandstone, soapstone, various cherts, and copper. Projectile points and other stone tools found at Poverty Point were made from raw materials which originated in the Ouachita and Ozarks Mountains and in the Ohio and Tennessee River valleys. Soapstone for vessels came from the Appalachian foothills of northern Alabama and Georgia. And then there was copper. Beautiful, gleaming, almost magical copper, introduced into the Poverty Point exchange system from sources that may have resided in the upper Great Lakes region, or even the Appalachian Mountains and Canadian Maritimes. Copper that had traveled, by some estimates, over 1,000 miles to end up here, hammered into beads and ornaments and ceremonial objects. And galena, a dense, silvery mineral with an almost mirror-like luster. Trace element analysis of galena artifacts at Poverty Point indicated that the majority of the rocks originated from the Potosi deposit in Missouri, while others were from the upper Mississippi Valley. According to archaeologists, galena artifacts were most frequently used in spiritual or religious ceremonies due to the lustrous quality of the galena. This luster led to the belief that galena artifacts were somewhat unearthly and could help further a connection with spirits. In total, exotic materials were transported to Poverty Point, an estimated 71 metric tons in all, over nearly 6 centuries. 71 metric tons of stone, mineral, and ore, dragged across a continent in canoes and on human backs, all flowing toward this one remarkable spot in the Louisiana lowlands. The Poverty Point trading network is one of the first instances of large-scale, long-distance trade in the Americas that can be fully demonstrated by archaeologists. And it wasn't simple bartering between neighbors. The trade was not simply a reciprocal exchange, but rather a more complicated directional trading pattern. Goods moved along specific routes, through specific hubs, suggesting a degree of economic planning and relationship management that we would more naturally associate with a civilization, not a society of fishermen and foragers. Archaeologists were able to identify a trading pattern that used the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, and the Arkansas River, as well as the Ouachita Stream, and stopped at sites, including Yazoo Basin and a Native American settlement at Kellyon. The rivers were the highways, the canoe was the cargo ship, and Poverty Point sat at the intersection of it all, like a great ancient port city, pulling the wealth of a continent toward itself. What did the people of Poverty Point do with all this imported material? They made things. Beautiful, intricate, skillful things. From these materials, the Poverty Point people made a variety of polished tools, pipes, ornaments, fetishes and effigies, buttons and beads, objects they could use and trade with other groups in the Mississippi Valley. They were not just consumers. They were craftspeople, manufacturers. They imported raw materials and exported finished goods, which is essentially the model of every successful trading city in history. Most beads are made of chert, but rare copper, steatite, and galena beads have been found at Poverty Point. The intricate owl designs carved from red jasper stone and the ceramic human figurines are particular to this place, a kind of brand identity, a Poverty Point aesthetic that archaeologists can identify at a glance. Art that told the world this came from us. This is who we are, who was coming to this place, and why. Some believe that several thousand people lived at the central site, and that other Poverty Point people occupied dozens of small villages and hunting camps along the streams and old river channels that radiated out 25 miles from the central earthworks. Other archaeologists point to the lack of burial mounds, and theorize that Poverty Point was a huge common campground used for ceremonial purposes and trade fairs. The truth may be both. Poverty Point was probably a permanent settlement for some, perhaps the craftspeople, the leaders, the priests, and a seasonal gathering place for many more. People would have come from hundreds of miles in every direction, bringing their goods, their news, their rituals, their disputes. They would have camped along the great curved ridges, traded, feasted, worshipped, and then paddled back home, carrying Poverty Point artifacts and Poverty Point ideas with them. Foreign artifacts in such large amounts could indicate that they were gifts used for ritual and social purposes by the gathering people. These gifts were left behind periodically, and over the several generations of people using the site, slowly accumulated into the hundreds of intricate artifacts discovered during archaeological excavations. Think of it as part Davos, part pilgrimage, part farmer's market, the kind of gathering that knits a civilization together even without writing, without money, without a state. And then, sometime around 1100 BC, it ended. The Poverty Point culture may have hit its peak around 1500 BC. After that, something began to shift. The trade routes thinned, the mound building slowed. By about 1100 BC, the great site was largely abandoned. Poverty Point culture was followed by the Chiffunct and Lake Cormorant cultures of the Chula period, a local manifestation of the early woodland period. These descendant cultures differed from Poverty Point culture in trading over shorter distances, creating less massive public projects, and lacking a lapidary stone carving industry. We don't know exactly why it collapsed. Climate change, perhaps, shifts in the river that disrupted the food supply, social fragmentation, the gradual unraveling of the trade relationships that held everything together. History is full of great networks that simply stopped working. What we know is that nothing like Poverty Point appeared in North America again for nearly 1,000 years. The site was rediscovered in the modern era almost by accident. Jacob Walters was an explorer looking for lead ore in the 1840s who reported finding Native American artifacts in the far northeastern corner of Louisiana. However, the earthworks at the site were too large to be recognizable from the ground. It took aerial photography in the 20th century before anyone could finally see what those ridges actually were. The deliberate, magnificent, planned geometry of a lost city. Poverty Point is one of 3 World Heritage archaeological sites north of Mexico. The character, size, and age of the 400-acre site is unique on the North American continent, and its influence can be seen in mound-building Native American cultures encountered by the Europeans who entered the lower Mississippi Valley in the 1500s to 1700s. What Poverty Point ultimately tells us is something deeply important about human nature. It tells us that the drive to connect, to trade, to travel, to bring distant things together in one place, is not a product of civilization. It is older than civilization. It is the thing that makes civilization possible. 3,700 years ago, on a muddy ridge above a great river, people with no writing and no metal tools built something that should not have been possible. They pulled copper from the Great Lakes and flint from the Ozarks and soapstone from the Appalachians, and they turned all of it into beauty, into tools, into sacred objects, into a web of relationships that spanned half a continent. They had no word for economy, but they understood, in their bones, what every great trading civilization has always known, that the person on the other side of the river with different stones and different knowledge is not a stranger to be feared. They are a partner, and together you can build something that neither of you could build alone. That is the story of Poverty Point, and it is in many ways the story of us.